Hi, my name is Jordy Izzard, and I'm Senior Associate Director of SAIS Alumni Relations. Today's date is March 27th, 2017, and we're here in Manila, Philippines with Philip Erquiaga, who graduated from SAIS with his master's in 1981. He also, interestingly, participated in the Havana SAIS program for 3 weeks during that time. Anyway, it's great to have you here. Thanks so much for participating in the SAIS Oral History program, and we're just going to have a little bit of a conversation.
Great.
And why don't we start with what originally brought you to SAIS?
Well, I had actually taken my undergraduate degree at the University of California in Berkeley, and a very good friend of mine who was a professor there, in fact my professor in political science, had spoken to me about graduate work in Washington, and he had mentioned Johns Hopkins and SAIS specifically as a potential graduate school, and had offered to help me get into to college there. It turned out that I decided, instead of going to graduate school immediately after undergraduate school, to spend 2 years on the road in Latin America. So effectively I ended up backpacking with my then girlfriend through, well, starting in Mexico and making my way down to Tierra del Fuego, where we ran out of money and I ended up working. So I worked in Chile for about a year. During that time, I decided to follow up on his suggestion. I ended up applying for school, sought his recommendation, and got accepted. So when I was ready to return to the United States, I ended up flying back to Washington and was walking down Massachusetts Avenue one day trying to get things together for upcoming term, and who should I see walking the streets but my old friend who had left the University of California at Berkeley and was now working at the Overseas Development Council, which was right across the street from SAIS, next to Brookings. And so he offered me a job at ODC. So it was a kind of interesting and fortuitous series of events that brought me to SAIS, but I would say the principal reason was this friend of mine who was a professor at UC Berkeley.
That's terrific. And then you started SAIS in 1979, is that right? Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about your memories of being a student there.
Well, at the time, 1979, the area where I lived, which was very close to SAIS, was transitional in nature. It was DuPont Circle, but it wasn't the DuPont Circle that we see today. It was very transitional. Well, I would say more than that. It was kind of a high crime rate area, and I had my share of experiences there with crime during the course of my early days at SAIS. Notwithstanding that, I have to say the entire area around DuPont Circle and around campus I found electric. You know, I found that it was everything that I was anticipating from Washington, from Johns Hopkins at the time. I found that my fellow students were very sharp, were very knowledgeable, were in the know, were keyed into a lot of events going on in Washington at the time. Case in point was that you may recall around 78, I think, the Sandinistas were about to take over in Nicaragua, and one of the people that I got to know fairly well, Arturo Cruz, was the son of the central bank, the forthcoming central bank owner, and got a real perspective on what was happening in Nicaragua. And after having spent 2 years on the road, of which part of that time was actually in Nicaragua under Somoza, I was very impressed, very be in that environment. What else can I tell you? The professors that I worked with in the Latin American Studies department were all first rate, were all fantastic, and I was very happy to be there.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. Now, in 1981, you earned your MA, and tell us a little bit about how your career evolved from there, or started, and then how it evolved to where we are now.
Well, look, you know, SAIS was a fantastic education for me in terms of giving me perspective in areas that I had kind of dipped into perhaps during my studies at UC Berkeley, but really went into in some greater detail and deeper detail when I went to school at SAIS. And what I mean by that is that I had a focus on Latin American studies, but I also was focused on economics, like all students at the time were required to be. And I found that that exposure prepared me in more ways than I anticipated for my future career prospects. I ended up going to the corporate sector after SAIS. I ended up working at Chase for about 5 years, something like that. And my entry into Chase coincided with the Latin American debt crisis. So the knowledge that I picked up at SAIS I thought was extremely useful in connection with my future responsibilities of renegotiating, essentially, public sector debt in Latin America. I have to say that the skills I picked up, you know, kind of the macro skills I picked up at SAIS also helped me with the work I did in the corporate sector in Colombia, because I also headed up the credit team in Colombia after being in New York for about 3 years, 4 years. And those very same skills that I referred to earlier that helped me on the public sector side were extremely useful on the private sector side as well. So I would say that you know, that skill set, that knowledge that one picks up at SAIS can take you in many different directions. The direction it took me in was in the direction of corporate work, in the direction of banking, and it gave me perspective that allowed me to sit down with CEOs, to sit down with CFOs, etc., and have a halfway intelligent conversation about trends and perspectives and things of that sort, both at the local economy level and at the global economy level. So.
Terrific. And you are with what organization now?
I now work with the Asian Development Bank.
Okay, so you're still with them. You've been with them for the duration.
Yeah. In fact, after about 5 years at Chase, I ended up accepting an offer given to me from the Asian Development Bank to work in their young professional program, which at that time was, well, I think it still is, a pretty selective program, small program, but a program designed to try to develop future managers within the institution and so forth. And I joined ADB as a YP, but later migrated to the Treasury, where I worked for about 13 years, first in fixed income and currency trading, and then heading up their quantitative risk group. And over the years, I headed up their guarantees and syndications group. I headed up their Pacific operations, and most recently, I headed up their project finance and capital market teams. So, and maybe if I can jump ahead to what I anticipate to be your next question about advice I would give to,
might you have current students today?
To students today.
Yeah, feel free.
SAIS was a wonderful education, you know, a broad education. It gives you, as I said earlier, broad perspectives on the economies, global economies, national economies, political situations in many different countries, trends in development. I mean, you name it. It gives you that perspective, and that's what I like very much about the SAIS education. However, I don't feel as if I got a trade at SAIS. I feel as if it prepared me for the trade that I later got, which really was through commercial banking. So what I'm trying to say by that is that for students today at SAIS, I would say take advantage of all that SAIS has to offer you. Take advantage of all the courses on economics, on political systems, comparative economies, and so forth and so on, that are fun and interesting and just a wonderful opportunity. But keep your mind on future directions that you may wish to take. And I would suggest that students today will never go wrong by focusing on the quant side. You know, I think that in my career at least, having gone through corporate world, having gone through you know, development banking, trading, and so forth and so on, there is always a premium attached to a CV that has quant skills associated with it. And this is what I got out of my training at Chase. I got a perspective on accounting, I got a perspective on financial analysis, I got a perspective on risk analysis, and so forth and so on. And it's really important to have those skills as well. So, for example, when I left Chase and went to work at ADB on securities trading side, I found myself drawing on both of these skills. You know, I found myself drawing on the quant skills that I picked up from Chase and the trade I learned at Chase. But then I found the perspective, I drew on the perspective that I got from SAIS. So in that connection, for example, just to give you an example, I used to work nights on the trading desk trading our US dollar book, and of course a lot of information is usually released at 8:30 at night, Manila time, 8:30 in the morning, New York time, of consequence to the markets. For example, the non-farm payroll number. The education at SAIS gave me perspective to interpret the number. The education from Chase gave me the skills to trade the number. So that's why I think it's really important for individuals today to keep their eye on that ball, you know. Just, you know, it may be, you know, not the funnest courses or whatever, but take a few of those quant courses. They're really important, and they really help you in your future career.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much for your time and all you do to help SAIS.
Sure.
And have a wonderful day.
Thank you.